Good. Well, thank you very much, everyone. We're going to start the next session now. I'm going to make an introduction lasting about 30 seconds and hand straight over to our first presentation. So we're talking today about how you keep supply chains stable, local supply food chains stable and short. That's the topic. We have four great speakers. We've got William Lloyd Williams, who is on his website says the last independent small abattoir and butcher in Monmouthshire, which I think is a lovely description. We have Deserie Mansfield from Monmouthshire County Council leading the food work there. We have Katherine and David Langton, who have just started a small farm in Crickhowell. And then we have Patrick Holden, the founder and director of the Sustainable Food Trust. What we're going to do is I've asked each of them to just spend 5 minutes talking about the topic, just introducing some key points. I'll show a short video of the project that David and Katherine are working on, the Langtons, and then we'll have a discussion and basically fueled by your comments and questions to the speakers. So the main body of the session is our discussion. So without further ado, I'm going to ask William Lloyd Williams to say a few words. William, you have 5 minutes.
Starting from now.
Starting now.
Right. Okay. I'm William Lloyd Williams. I'm a third generation farmer, abattoir owner and butcher's business. I think the one thing that's unique maybe about third generation, the three of us were called William Lloyd Williams, William Lloyd Williams, William Lloyd Williams. So the three wise men possibly. I'm extremely passionate about the term local food. So much so that when we had European legislation thrust upon us in the 70s, and I was a very raw 17, 18-year-old, very dangerous, took very unkindly to someone with a clipboard from the Welsh Office Agricultural Department, as it was then, coming round to tell me if I didn't do this, didn't do that, they would close me down. It wasn't because I was pedantic and bloody-minded. I was very passionate about what I did and what the customers wanted. And we just evolved from there. And I think what's important here is that I'm a massive advocate of a small food chain, because the less people involved, if there's a problem, it's easily to trace. And by doing what I'm doing, I like to think that I'm bringing the producer and the customer as close together as we possibly can. And that's what everybody wants. And I'd like to explain a little bit more of the fact that because we did what we did, we started winning a few awards. And I think what was pleasing about this was that the awards that we won were not for a special day that we did something. It was for what we did all day, every day. And because of that, people started taking notice. Well, look, this little guy has got a list in his window where everything comes from. We don't see that in lots of other places. If he can do it, why can't other people do it? And it evolved from there. And, well, the first award we had was back in 2003, which was Clarissa Dixon Wright and a friend, the two fat ladies. They gave us Country Life Food Producer of the Year. We then went on to win a True Taste Award, and well, the business evolved. Business grew. We had to spend money on the abattoir. We had to spend money on buying the shop next door to make the premises a food hall. And I always liken my business to a cake, even though we're butchers. And there are three main ingredients. The quality of the livestock that we have in our area, the understanding, hard work and diligence of my staff, and then the last ingredient, the loyalty of the customers that have stuck with me throughout these turbulent 30, 40 years where we've had, you know, online, we've had supermarkets. So I don't want to go on any further. That's what I do, and I'm very proud to do it, and hope to be able to continue to do it. Thank you very much, Duncan.
Thank you, William. That's absolutely fantastic, and we'll come back to you on that. I like the concept of bringing the customer and producer close together. That's something that perhaps we can explore a bit later on. I'll now hand over to Deserie Mansfield from Monmouthshire County Council to talk about the work that you're doing on local food.
Yeah, thank you, Duncan. Hello, board everyone. Yes, I'm the RDP Food Development Officer for Monmouthshire County Council and the Local Action Group. I want to talk a little bit to follow on from what William's just said, actually, and perhaps pose a couple of other questions to that, to question some of the things that we are talking about throughout the conference. So, Monmouthshire is a rural county, as you would probably well know. Our communities are well versed in farming and food production, predominantly arable. We have over 90 food producers and obviously a reputation for, within certain aspects, of championing the support for our county particularly and its food businesses. And one of the key things that we're looking at the moment is how we develop our short supply chains, how we actually support the development of those businesses. And as an authority, we're committed to supporting all of that. But I just want to touch on something that links to the complexity of the short supply chain and the local. And I'm going to pose a question on how local is local, but I'm going to come to that in a minute. Yeah, the complexity of it all, I guess, is that, as somebody said in the last session, never before, I think, has this discussion been had where it links such things as food poverty, housing development. Obviously, we have climate change and the sustainability issue. And I think we're all moving towards working closer together, which is quite clearly what we need to do. Within Monmouthshire County Council, we're developing a draft action plan. It is in draft at the moment, which is actually looking at 4 key areas, which is the access to land, education and training, food waste, one of the key elements, but particularly our focus on procurement and the short supply chain. And we're looking at ourselves really as an exemplar. We're actually looking quite closely at where do we buy our food products from, and all of the other commodities that we purchase as a local authority, trying to bring in that short supply chain, etc., but without difficulties, let's just say. And I'll come to that in the future. So, yeah, when I'm talking about Monmouthshire, I also want to. I feel that we should also discuss that it's not an issue that is county-wide. It's no good walking a road alone. You know, no town, county or country can do this alone, or individual organisations, and we need to progress together. Globally, the issues are the same, and I know collaboration has been mentioned previously, and I think that is absolutely the way forward. We can't all be furrowing our own plough, if you'll excuse the pun. We have to move towards our communities, moving together towards the sustainability issue. So, how we feed the nations, we need to look quite closely at where we procure our food and how we access our food. So it isn't just about the access to food, as in purchasing directly from shop or food producer. It's actually more complex. And one of the things that we're doing within Monmouthshire is looking at where we gain our information from, our data. So, for example, you can't grow food if your soil is incorrect or wrong. And there are others with greater skills and knowledge than me about soil and land management. But what we do know is, for example, that NRW, National Resources Wales, are looking at land mapping, Ordnance Survey are looking at land mapping. Where is the spare land that we could grow on? What does the produce look like? Should we be diversifying, growing carrots instead of sprouts because of climate change, for example? So that is one of the major projects that I'm managing at the moment. And what we're putting together is a piece of work where we can analyse the data together, where access to that data will come from just anybody that needs some information. So depending on the data that goes into it, it could be a farmer or grower looking at some of the questions I just posed. It could be looking at potentially what are the cost of me growing carrots as opposed to the cost of the supermarkets selling the carrots. So consequently, there are lots of different ways to look at that data and to actually look at the depth of the complexity of that short supply chain. Because we can't support our supply chain, even though we know what the actions are needed. Quite often, particularly at a strategic level, a Wales level or a national level, they say, prove it. What do you mean? And we all work in silos. So the point of that is that we know food has no boundaries. And the question that I said earlier on is how local is local? We're also working in Monmouthshire County Council with an organisation and 10 different countries in a European programme called Robust. And I just want to make a little quote from something that we've commissioned, which is a paper that says how local is local. And I will circulate that later if that's okay. And what that suggests is obviously that buying local is not as straightforward as we think. We use the term local food in a very simplistic way sometimes. I'm posing a question, it's not necessarily my thoughts, but it does sometimes narrow the geographical approach to a sort of a full diet risk or leaving nutritional gaps, seasonal gaps. So if we're purchasing our tomatoes, let's just say from externally like Spain or somewhere else, why aren't we growing them in the UK? Are we growing them in the UK? Is there a shorter supply chain that we don't know about? And maybe that's something that we need to gather in this information piece. So obviously all of the questions that I've just posed have implications on the public plate, and that's what I'm focusing on at the moment. What we currently need to know is where, what supply and demand is there, and where are the volumes, who's growing what, and what is the traceability of food? William just mentioned, I think, traceability of food. I'm passionate about this. When we're making our purchases, are we sure that food has some sort of traceability aspect? And at the moment, within the public plate, we find that quite difficult. So when we purchase through our main contracts, our suppliers will offer us whatever it might be that produce is. If they haven't got the volumes, they may then go and supplement that, and then we lose that traceability. So culturally in Wales, we pay a great deal of store, quite rightly, on the beautiful foods that we produce and sell. But sometimes that traceability is questioned if you go to a wider supplier.
Deserie,
Yes.
Can you finish and then we'll come back? There are questions appearing already for you.
Yes, that's fantastic. I just want to finish really, because I'm just, as I said at the beginning, I'm posing the questions. How local is local? How do we gather that data, use that data, work together from a smaller supply chain and up to the larger ones, perhaps in the public plate?
Thank you very much, Deserie. So there's the question. Respond in the chat. I'll say something about the chat now. So if you want to ask questions as we're going through, just put them in the chat. You can use Welsh. The questions can be asked in Welsh, that's okay. David is here and he is processing those. He's waving and will present those questions to me in the next part of the discussion. So while the questions are fresh in your mind, stick them there. They're being processed, they're being prepared, and they'll come back into the discussion. I want to hand over to Katherine and Dave Langton in their polytunnel to talk about the practical work that they've just started in growing for a local market and the challenges of starting up.
Sure. Are we showing the video first or after?
No, we'll show the video after.
Okay.
Is that okay, or do you want me to show it now?
It probably gives more context if they see the film first.
Okay, we have a little video of the Dave and Katherine, so we're going to show that right now. I'm going to share my screen. Is that coming up?
Yeah.
Right, so let me put it on for.
improve sound.
Is that working?
There's an extra sound button you have to press, Duncan, when you do the share.
Right.
It's at the bottom left of the share screen. So you do share screen and you go down to the bottom left and you share computer sound as well before you choose which window to show.
So say again. Go to share screen.
Do share screen. Get that up.
Yeah, I got it.
Yeah.
Sorry about that, folks. Slowly.
Langton's farm is a regenerative farm. We're just outside of Crickhowell.
Where we're standing is going to be our wash pack station and our cooler. We're going to have 15 beds here, then a polytunnel along here, and then 15 more beds here.
It took us 18 months or so to find the land, and we linked up with a local farmer who had this field. It's 3.5 acres, and we're farming the vegetables on the bottom 1.5 acres, and then we plan on pastured poultry, eggs and so on the hill, which is the other 2 acres. Yeah, we're just trying to set up a market garden that can support both Katherine and myself equivalent full-time wages.
It can be a little bit daunting. The hardest part is just starting, so yeah, just do it. There are like thousands of hours of video on the internet about how to do stuff. There are books, and also there's like Facebook communities of organic market gardeners, so you just, if you can't find the answer you want on the internet or in a book, you ask and someone will have the answer.
For the business plan, we used a template from online, just quite a standard one, and then to fill in sort of the detail for that, to create it, we used information from various books from other market gardeners, generally from sort of Canada, America, Sweden. And Katherine did most of the words and I did the numbers, and we worked as a good team. So we started with our microgreens business, and that was relatively simple to set up within a few £1,000s. We used some of the profits from that in order to start the farm, and we also secured a loan. It's important to say that this kind of market garden farming style is relatively low investment to start with.
We didn't have to invest in a tractor, or we didn't buy land, we're renting land, so it means that we have low startup costs. The method we use is a no-dig or no-till system. We have bought in some municipal waste compost, and we just lay that on top of the ground. We first put a black tarp down to kill the grass and the weeds, and then we laid out some craft paper, and then on top of that we put the compost, and we can just plant straight into that. So we use the 30-inch or 75-centimetre bed system, which is very popular all over the world. We also plant quite densely, so that when the plant is at full size, the canopies of each plant touch each other, and that shades out the weeds from underneath, and also retains moisture in the soil. There are a lot of tools that fit on that size bed.
We can utilise almost every square metre of the farm, and we are selling direct to the public for the vast majority. That helps us to keep our margins higher, which otherwise would be very tight.
So we've started with about 30 to 40 vegetable beds and one polytunnel, and it means that we can kind of get a foothold onto what we're doing, how to do it, grow our customer base.
From the vegetables, we'll be adding on layer hens, pastured broilers, Tamworth pigs, flowers, and we want to provide everything that you'd expect to get from a small family farm.
Great, I hope that was okay. They've started mowing the lawn next door. I mean, you couldn't make it up, could you? I can't hear a thing. Anyway, Dave and Catherine, over to you.
Hi, Duncan. Yeah, so we have been selling veg boxes. We're now at between 50 and 60 a week. I think what we've learned is the demand for local hasn't really been tapped. There's huge demand for local. There's huge demand for food that people can see being grown, and all the market gardeners, or the people with farm shops, maybe like a large farm growing potatoes or beetroot and that kind of thing, their demand has exploded. Yeah, I think that's something that we've learned. I think it's been increased by COVID. That's put, I think, the vulnerability of supply chains in the forefront of people's minds. So I think that's given quite a good boost to local food, regional food. But I think, going on what was said earlier, one of our problems is the lack of local abattoirs. That's something that we have to travel quite far out for. We have to go into England for chicken, to find someone to butcher our chickens for us, and we have to go towards Bridgend for pork. There is a more local abattoir in Targarth, but not only are there a lower number of local abattoirs available, but there's an even smaller number of organic certified abattoirs. That's an even bigger problem for us, is that even the closest ones aren't able to be used for us. So yeah, lots of challenges, but definitely huge room for growth. And there are half a dozen more market gardens that are starting up locally, that we've been sort of introduced to since we've started. Since they've seen us here, they've contacted us and said that they're doing the same thing. Between sort of, there's one 15 miles away, there's one 3 miles away, which is actually some really good friends of ours, the land that we actually looked at before we came here, and they've decided to do it themselves.
And we're not worried about competition from these other market gardeners. We actually have a waiting list for our veg boxes. There's so much demand for people wanting good local food that they could set up like 10 or 20 or 50 like small farms in the local like surrounding area, and it wouldn't have an impact on us.
Wales.
Yeah, it's there's so much demand for local food that we can't reach everyone.
And we work together with these other local farms.
So we started our market garden at the end of spring, beginning of summer. So we missed the planting time for a lot of things like Brussels sprouts and cabbage and that kind of stuff. So we don't have those available now, but we're working with other market gardeners and buying a few things in to supplement the things that we can supply in our veg boxes.
And more than just, because that puts us as a customer to the people that we're working with, which obviously they're still making money. But we've received a lot of help from people who are setting up market gardens in the area. So they've helped us make our no-dig beds. They've helped us, even last week, they were helping us plant garlic. We've sort of bulk bought stuff together. We've gone out and helped them with sort of drainage issues and solutions and stuff like that. It works out really well. Putting up polytunnels together, that kind of stuff. Yeah, it's really nice to be part of, I guess, an industry that at the moment, due to, I guess, huge demand and not enough supply, it's quite a friendly competition. So yeah, I guess that's probably most of what we've got to say. I think one of our biggest issues for keeping things sustainable, keeping things local, is the lack of local organic abattoirs, and the need to expand quickly, because you can't supply everything from day one. So working with already established farms and market gardens to supply the products that you can't do straight away really does help us.
That's fantastic. Thanks very much. As a customer of the Langton's farm, I can say that it's really what I was impressed by. I'm particularly impressed by is the fact that they've, you know, that the field was empty in April, and there's a veg box every week. And because you're collaborating with other producers, you manage to maintain a complete box, even though you've only planted 25% of the beds that you intend to plant. So you're not there yet, but you're still building a customer base within months of starting. I think that's really impressive, and you're retaining that customer base. You're not just stopping and starting. And I think that's changing habits. You know, I mean, I've lived in Crickhowell for 23 years and never been able to buy local vegetables. This is the first time. So it is amazing. Well, now, thank you very much for that. We'll come back to that. There are going to be loads of questions for you guys. I can see them already, so be ready. So now I'm going to hand the floor to Patrick Holden. You probably all know Patrick. He's a very prominent figure in this field. Founder and director of Sustainable Food Trust. And just decades of experience of these local food systems. So over to you, Patrick.
Thank you, Duncan. It is decades, actually. I'm so ancient that it's nearly 5 decades. I was back to the lander back in the 1970s. And I was reflecting during this session, which is brilliant, that our local food story kind of is in inverse. We started selling locally. We were producing flour and milling it for the Aberystwyth Whole Food Shop, and then selling carrots to the co-op in Lampeter, and then making cheese in Lampeter. But as time has gone, then we started supplying carrots to Sainsbury's and then all the other supermarkets when Organic Farm Foods had their pack house in Lampeter. And then as time has gone by, we gave up growing carrots because we couldn't make it work locally. And then eventually the situation today is we're making cheese, which is going as far afield as Australia, South America, and Europe, which is a terrible paradox, although about 1/3 of the cheese that we're producing is sold in Wales. What I want to reflect on is what it would take for the whole of the Welsh farming culture and community to reconnect with the citizens of Wales, and what would the design of the food systems look like that would enable that to happen. I guess what we've already heard from this morning are some fantastic, what you might call disruptive new emergent models, either just direct local selling, as we've just heard, or the amazing hub system with kind of virtual farmers markets, and of course the farmers markets and all the existing box schemes. But I suppose my sort of thought is, what would it take for this to become really mainstream? And I haven't really got an answer to the question, but what I would say would be that we need these disruptive new models, like Peter Seger, who I think is on this call, is selling. He's got a kind of franchising arrangement in Watson and Pratt's in Lampeter, where he's taken some of the shelving area of the shop and he's setting the prices, and he's supplying, or he and Anne are supplying Watson and Pratt's, and it's working really well. So I think franchising in existing retail outlets is a really interesting opportunity. And then of course the food hub thing, which is really exciting. But one of the things that I would like to do is to have a meeting. I've been talking to John Davis, who's the president of the LFU Cymru, and we thought we ought to call a meeting of all the supermarkets and just say, look, you know, this is the future. What are you going to do about it? And I know that there are some supermarkets that are kind of tokenistically selling local food in some of their stores, and I'm not necessarily pro supermarkets, but I just think that the infrastructure that exists, that probably 90% of the people in Wales do all their shopping in, it really needs to be part of this solution if we're going to get things to go to scale. I have got, apart from things like public procurement, which has also come up, I haven't got the solutions, but I sort of feel that it's a moment now, because of all the incredible stories that are coming up in this conference, that something else should happen to enable more people to get involved, including ourselves, because at the moment we're slightly frustrated that we can't sell more of our veal and our cheese in Wales, and probably the infrastructure doesn't currently exist to do it. You can follow us, by the way, on our, I've been contributing to the chat. You can follow the Sustainable Food Trust, or if you want to follow us on Instagram at the farm, we'll have our cheese. So I'll stop there.
Thanks very much, Patrick. So how do you scale up? I think that's a huge question, because you know, we can't be niche forever, and this is, you know, that we're in a crisis. We've got to become mainstream, and I think that's the big issue that we face now over the next few years. So we are now we'll now open up the discussion. So David, do you want to, how are you going to do this? Have you got questions already?
I think there's 2 or 3 themes developing here. We're covering a lot of ground very quickly here. To come back, the public sector procurement is an issue. Somebody asked words long to the effect that is there a Deserie in every county in Wales? I think sadly, Deserie, your answer was no, or not, at least not in the same form. The other one that's cropped up a number of occasions is food labelling. This ties in with a part of a debate we've had on traceability as well. And this is an area where, you know, action could definitely be taken. The opportunity, there's a strong sense of opportunity here as well, in that there's the COVID. It's not unusual for a crisis to throw a spotlight or a focus on food issues. And at such times, you can take it right back to BSE and the Tesco horse meat scandal. Customers do look more to the local, to the certified suppliers, particularly organic. And of course, we are in the middle of a pretty major crisis at the moment. One can only hope that there are positive aspects that would last in this change of attitude. But I think to sort of deal them with in some sort of chronological order, perhaps if there's any comments on the procurement and possibly supplying more locally. I don't think anybody is going to make a lot of money out of public sector supply, but it can provide the bread and butter and keep a regular turnover, which will keep the business functioning, while the market, other parts of the market, can hopefully provide a bit of cream or jam on top.
Does anyone want to, if you want, panelists and speakers, if you want to say something, just wave at me. I can see you. Deserie.
Hi, am I on mute? No.
No?
Yeah, I'd like to come into that, because I think, as David's just said, there's a key point there about, you know, public procurement won't change the face of smaller businesses, perhaps, because of the bureaucracy that's around the contracting. But we are looking currently at, under the NPS scheme, the framework for purchase in Wales, to make some changes so that there can be joint applications, that smaller organisations can perhaps bid together. So if they don't have the volume, for example, they can join with others that do. So the cooperative working process. I can't speak too much about the framework because I'm not actually involved in the strategic stuff. But I also want to just say quickly that it can be a two-edged sword for small businesses, if you like, because when a smaller organisation bids for a contract, say in the public sector, it's usually over 3 years, 3 to 5 years sometimes. Now, not everybody wants to put all their eggs in one basket either. You know, what happens if they rely on that particular contract and in the next contracting period they no longer have that, somebody else steps in. So you know, it can be a two-edged sword with public procurement, but I think you have to look at it differently. And I think what we're doing in Monmouthshire is looking at not so much as how the business interact with us, but how we interact with businesses, how we make sure that we purchase from smaller suppliers.
Can I put something to William and also Dave and Catherine? Is there just enough? I mean, for the small food business, is there just enough supply to reach the public sector? I mean, you know, are you selling to the public sector? And if not, why not? That would be a question. William.
Yeah, if I can come in, the problem's always been with the public sector is you have to put a tender in, and it's price. It's always price. Now, I'll just mention now a natural lockdown now, not the COVID lockdown, but a company when we were Monmouthshire District Council, not Powys. This is a long time ago, but just to explain, everything's driven by price. When we had 2 foot of snow.
Like Miss Barnes and Mr. Bridge.
Can you hear?
Yeah.
Can you hear me? Yeah. When we had 2 foot of snow, the guy that had the contract on the lowest price, he couldn't come. So all of a sudden, Will Lloyd Butchers in Machynlleth was good enough because they couldn't get to it. They couldn't get to the place that they were supplying. So it makes you think then, when everything's driven by price, when there's 2 foot of snow for a fortnight and people can't come to deliver their product, the local guy is good enough then to keep everyone alive. So it doesn't matter what price he is then, it's good enough to be able to feed these schools, old people's homes and hospitals. Can you understand where I'm coming from?
Yeah.
Can I just come in with something on that issue? I don't know if you can hear me.
Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. So I put in the chat something, a website, dynamicfood.org, and I don't know if anyone has sort of tuned into the dynamic food procurement movement that's started up over here in the southwest in England, sort of Bath, Bristol way. So there's now a national dynamic food procurement board, and the dynamic food procurement model is all about routes to market for SMEs, supplying into public institutions, and it gets rid of that 3-year thing, those long terms. It's very much designed around the small producer, and if you can supply one thing for a month, then you supply that. If you can, you know, it's yes, it is Rich Osborne, yeah, and there's some amazing work going on being piloted in the southwest around that, which is very much designed for the producer and for transparency, so that price is not the only thing, and so that often public institutions, they don't have the data on, you know, the provenance, on the carbon footprint and all of that. They don't have the information to make better choices. And so the dynamic food system platform that they're developing allows the buyers to look at a whole range of criteria beyond just price and choose food on other bases as well. Yeah, so I just wanted to wrap that up.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing. I mean, what we've found in the region, because I'm, you know, Monmouthshire and the National Brecon Beacon National Park, is that that, you know, the fundamental problem at the moment is there's not enough supply, so all of these things can't kick in. As Dave and Catherine were saying, and everything they produce is immediately sold to residents, and that's the first market, and that's not saturated yet. There just has to be more supply before we start moving up the levels. But what's interesting about that model that's just been presented is the way it's collaborative, that the small, you know, to reach these high markets, and also, you know, neighbouring cities and things like that, collaboration and keeping overheads down is a key consideration. But we're not quite there yet because we just don't have enough producers, although it's growing. Does anyone else want to pitch in on the procurement issue?
Yeah, I think there's an issue, Duncan, about whether it's supply or demand, because, you know, there is the supply. Somebody just said on the chat, you know, there are the existing commodity slavery system where all the farmers are selling food, the food they produce in Wales, often at, you know, hardly above the cost of production, just takes it into the usual system. So actually there's plenty of supply there. We need to generate demand as well as thinking about, you know, increasing supply. Because I reckon there are thousands and thousands of farmers who'd absolutely love to take advantage of selling food into local markets, if only the combination of the demand and the infrastructure exists. And I think we have to work on all levels at once. It isn't just increasing supply. I mean, we've got more supply that we can deal with at the moment with veal, just to give you one example from our male calves. And, you know, so it's really about a public engagement on a big level so that it becomes a big campaign to, you know, get people, normal people, to buy proper food. And I think there needs to be some thought about that as well.
I think the other potential role, there are always cuts of lamb or livestock or vegetables, which are perfectly good, but they won't command the premium because of their appearance. And yet, in terms of nutrition and if they're being cooked or processed in a cowl or whatever, they are perfectly good. So you can add value to the output of local growers in this way.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's an education point as well, isn't it? It's a loyalty point. That it needs to be a kind of principle that, of course, you would buy all your staple foods from Wales. Why would you not do that? And we need to shame the supermarkets. Not that I, as I said earlier, not that I think the supermarket is the whole thing, but, you know.
William.
I'm pushed into something that's called a PGI, a Protected Geographical Indicator. I'm not happy because it's something really that we're moved to do, because if we don't, we can't sell, we can't have posters with Welsh lamb and beef on. But the amount of hoops I have to jump through, and the farmers, to get a PGI certification, and then does that certification put more money in my till? No, I don't think it does, because the notices I put out, i.e. the livestock movements, the animal movement permits, the residue tests, the farm assurance numbers, they're all up in the shop so that consumers can look at them. More people look at that than this PGI. And, you know, there's a lot of resource put into this. And when I'm told then that if I don't do this, I can't have posters with Welsh beef and Welsh lamb on. And I'm doing what my customers want, because in my shop I have a sign. Our next customer is our next inspector. And that's pretty down to it, because if they didn't like what they saw, they wouldn't come back. If they didn't come back, we wouldn't be there.
Yeah. Katherine, you waved.
Well, Dave did. I waved.
Oh, Dave waved. Got you to wave.
We're only at the start, but there's definitely room to increase supply in order to go into sort of procurement areas. It depends on, I think, what it is. You can't concentrate too much on lots of different things, but more getting good at one or two things. And I think that for us, it'll be more concentrating on products that don't have very good shelf lives, so don't transport as well. So perhaps if that was schools or councils or care homes where you can get a better quality salad perhaps, or something along those lines, because local of those kind of items really does make a difference in terms of sort of taste and nutrient density that we were all talking about earlier. Yeah, there's definitely room for supply to grow. It's just linking that supply with the demand, and that's the same thing it was mentioned earlier with the going to be lots of farms growing great crops that have to sell them at, as it would say, barely above production, and sometimes below production costs, but above, they make profit with certain subsidies. Potatoes, for example, I mean, you're probably getting, I don't know, 30 pence, 35 pence a kilo, if that, in big margins, but then people are paying £1.30 in the shops. The huge, I mean, the farmer's done, you know, a huge amount of the work there, and is getting less than a quarter of the profit. It's when you have a direct to market, direct to customer, like chain, then there's a much higher margin. And I would assume that being a small businesses, local abattoirs and butchers also end up giving the farmers a higher chunk of the profit than, say, a supermarket, which is all about price and profit, less about the quality.
Can I pick up on that and pitch it back to Patrick? Patrick, you said you're talking to the supermarkets. Provocative question: can supermarkets be a part of this solution at all, on the grounds that they depend on such a high margin, on taking out such a high margin? Can there ever be a connection between producers and consumers in Wales that is viable for the producers if supermarkets are the intermediary?
Well, I think that's really, I'm not going to say I could answer that question. I can just offer a few reflections about it. You could say that the disruptive new models of food systems that have been featured in this conference might just suddenly eclipse the old, you know, supermarket model, which is just a kind of great big real estate platform for mega global companies to make very large margins, or they won't say that, but, you know, to take a lot of the margin that should go to the primary producers. And you could argue that if the old road is rapidly aging, to quote Bob Dylan, they need to get out on the new one, and the new one might be to franchise their car parks for local growers, or even to do what Peter Seger is doing in Watson and Pratt's. Why not? You know, so I think the supermarkets that adapt will survive, and those that don't will go out of business. I think it's that extreme what's going on at the moment, because we're living in the last chance saloon with climate change and biodiversity loss. And there are so many young people who are really interested in new models of food systems, as we see, like now. And it's an incredibly exciting time. And I think that's what I was just saying to John Pentra, John Davis, the president of NFU. So he gets this stuff. He's grown organic vegetables in the corner of his farm this year because he realizes that things are changing. And he's, you know, he's in a leadership position. He can say to all his members, let's get, so I think if we called a meeting of all the supermarkets in Wales and said, right, what are you going to do? Not just tokenistic stuff, but what are you going to do to help Welsh farmers sell more of their lamb and their beef, mainly grass-fed, and their vegetables, because vegetables can go brilliantly in Wales, in your stores. And obviously they can say no, but I think they'll all come to a meeting because they need to listen to this stuff. I think there's an enormous power in what's going on at the moment.
I love the idea of them giving out their car parks. I think that would work very well, actually. But yeah,
well, yeah, it's perfect platform, isn't it? Yeah, there they are. Well, you know, they could
you buy your tins inside, and you go outside and you buy everything else.
Yeah.
All in one go.
When I started growing carrots, I used to go to the co-op in Langton with bunched carrots. Mr. Jones was the manager then, and I did it for a few years, and he took up to 150 bunches a day. And then, of course, they said, oh, you can't do that anymore. It's got to go to Manchester. Well, it's come full circle now, hasn't it?
Yeah. David, have you got more questions and comments to feed through?
I think the issue of cooperating, because some of this is the issue of scalability has come up a number of occasions. And I was quite interested, David and Katherine Langton, they were mentioning the phrase friendly competition. And food production is unusual, and if you're a small company producing widgets, then another company producing a similar widget would be your greatest competitor. Now they've actually experienced where they have been able to work with other people in the same sector. I'm just wondering what their thoughts are on the potential to develop this.
To develop working together in cooperatives.
Has my internet connection gone off?
No, you're still there. Oh. Sorry, Dave was asking for clarification.
Right, sorry about that. My internet connection is on the blink, I think. In your presentation, you mentioned when you were starting up and the availability of knowledge and information, and that I think you said that you did quite a bit of help with other people and you reciprocated with some of their projects. The phrase you used was friendly cooperation. I'm just wondering if you think what potential there is to develop that relationship into something basically with the ultimate end of increasing supply.
Yes, some kind of cooperative movement in terms of helping each other. We've already offered to help. So this is our first year. Some of the farms next year will be their first year. So we've already spoken to them and said, things you might not be able to grow. Maybe if you can't get your polytunnel up close fast enough, we can supply cucumbers or something like that. And we've already approached other organic market gardeners to purchase things off them. So put an order in this year for 5,000 to 10,000 cabbages, cauliflowers, broccoli, that kind of stuff that they grow on a large scale within 5 to 10 miles of here, which is really local, certified organic, and allows us to reach a much wider audience, much bigger customer base. I think that we're already certainly making moves to build on the cooperation.
Do you think within that, because there are different skill sets in market gardening, there's the propagation aspect of it and the logistics of that, and then there's the planting out on field scale. As you build up expertise, do you think there's a role that you can do? You also mentioned in your talk about the need to specialize to a degree. Do you think there's a role that you might have a role in the propagation, and then you would encourage others just to grow, say, a single crop or 2 or 3 crops, so it would take the stress out of learning for them?
I think to a certain degree, customers like to get their veg from someone. So I think that delivered veg is, or delivered anything is becoming more and more popular. So to an extent, I think veg boxes as a whole are quite important. So whether a group of people could work together to form a veg box with maybe 6 or 7 different farmers. But that aside, I think that it's nice that a market gardener, for example, like us, would grow a wide range of crops. But
it also makes us more resilient. So if all your carrots fail, it's okay because you've got loads of other vegetables. You're not relying on just a couple of different items. You've got that backup, so you're resilient to whatever happens, whether it's financial or social or like an environmental issue. You can overcome all of it by that diversity, and also diversity of customers as well. You're not just selling to one supermarket, one different product. You've got lots of products and lots of customers.
And I don't know if you can hear us over the road, but we're small scale. We're only 1.5 acres for the veg production side of things. So there's definitely there's a place for field grown crops. So I think that in itself is much aligns itself much better for specializing in certain crops, such as the field grown, where you do several acres of one crop. So we will, it doesn't make sense for us, for example, to grow potatoes. It would be mad for us. We grew them this year and it was horrendous. We've had to put our potatoes at a higher price than we would like to because of the labour involved in harvesting them. But we've now found a place that we can buy potatoes from, organic certified potatoes, and we are able to lower the price of our potatoes or increase the amount of potatoes in a veg box. So, yeah, I think there is definitely room for collaboration, room for specialisation, but I think it's still important that there's a range of crops available.
Can I ask a question,
Yeah,
Duncan?
yeah.
I just would be very interested, somebody's just asked on the chat, how many people can your acre of veg feed? I think that's a really important question because we're doing a study at the moment looking at the, if the whole of the UK switched to regenerative farming systems, what would be produced and in what proportions? And in that modelling exercise, we need to know the yields that can be produced by the sort of systems that, you know, we've just seen operating on an acre of land. So it'd be really interesting to have any data that you're collecting on that.
Yeah, so our veg side is about 1.5 acres, and that's basically the flat area. But realistically, like when you include paths and, you know, a place to put our car and compost piles and so on, we're probably only growing on 3/4 of an acre. So I think we're looking to, if we were supplying it all completely ourselves throughout the year, 52 weeks in the year, we're probably around 100 people on sort of a medium size.
100 families.
100 families.
100 2.4 person households.
So we're probably looking to go to around 100 to 200 relatively over the next few years. And that is helped by the fact that we can buy potatoes elsewhere. We'll probably source our brassicas, as I say, within a 10-mile radius from us, and that kind of thing. So
have you got weights of the stuff you're producing?
Sorry, weights or waste?
Yeah, yields, you know, weights, you know, the actual weight of the produce you're selling.
It depends.
Or,
we grow,
you know, yields per acre, or, you know, just
100
because it's
different
really,
crops.
supposing there are 1,000 of you all over Wales, you know what I mean? It's really important to know how much you're growing that's actually edible stuff that you're selling.
So there is, we grow, you know, 100 different things. We grew and lots of different varieties of each thing, which makes huge amounts of difference with the yield. I mean, we grew 50 varieties of tomato alone this year. So yeah, it's difficult to say. I mean, a bed of red Russian kale, for example, might make 30, 40 kilos over a 6-month period in a 10-meter squared area, or even a 7.5 meter squared area. We don't really work on acreage yields. It's difficult. I mean, so each of our bed is 7.5 square meters, which is maybe a 1/50th of an acre? No, way less. I think 1/500th of an acre or something like that. So I don't know, on that kind of 7.5 square meters, we might fit 70 cabbages, and they all weigh, I don't know, a kilo or something like that. We work on per bed yields,
I think it's
which probably wouldn't help you.
easier to work out how many people we're feeding rather than how much volume of
well, the chat's going crazy with lots of links to places people have got the data, so it's just great. You know, but it's great. I just think it's a really important question, because we're talking about, could Wales supply all the vegetables that if everyone was loyal to Welsh vegetable production of all the staples, it'd be really interesting to do the calculation of how many holdings like yours or Peter and Anne's would be needed to supply, and, you know, others, Alicia's on the call as well, would be needed in Wales to supply the whole of Wales with all their vegetables if they suddenly got loyal to sourcing them all from Wales, just so we know the numbers.
I think Duncan Duncan has some numbers
Yeah,
on the website.
yeah. Well, we ran it because someone pitched to me the question. You know, so let's make the aim to supply 1/3 of all the vegetables in Monmouthshire to local people. And we thought, okay, well, how many farms is that? How many acres of that is that? Because I had no idea. It turns out to be about 50. Right?
50 acres?
50 acres.
Would supply
Not a lot.
Many people? How many people would that supply?
That supplies. The thing is, I don't have the figures, so I'm not. I shouldn't really. But we worked it out because we wanted to know. We wanted to just how big is this issue, and what Duncan, we found was it's remarkably not big. It's remarkably, incredibly doable. That was it. It was just stunningly so.
That's one
because
though,
of high productivity. It's the secret is just how much you can get out of 1 acre if you do it the right way.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
The secret is productivity. Yeah.
Okay.
Very, very high productivity, and then you start to get extraordinary figures.
Yeah, Duncan.
It's really exciting. Peter.
Yeah.
I just wanted to say that if you come along to the session after lunch, I think either Hannah Pitt or somebody else has much more detailed figures that will be available to anybody.
Yeah, that would be brilliant.
Duncan,
I think we need to.
Questions here on abattoirs, and William's thoughts were requested on what can be done there.
Well, I don't know what can be done, but you know the question is why aren't there small abattoirs? You know, you're looking at Powys as a county. It's the biggest county in Wales. It's predominantly agricultural, which is livestock farming. And we have 2 small abattoirs, 2 small multi-species abattoirs, me right up in the north and my friend Brian George down in Talgath in the south. Now, you have to ask the reason in Monmouthshire, when I took the mantle of digging my heels in, there were 8 small abattoirs. But people came round us with their clipboards and they frightened these people who'd got no dependents, were at maybe pension age, and telling them that if they didn't spend up to 250, 280,000, their business would be closed. Now, we did invest, but what you've got to understand is it doesn't matter what we do, someone else will come in a different white coat and a different clipboard and ask for something else. And there is a limit to how many times you can go to the well with a bucket for water when there's no water there, i.e. the bank. And it's great to be able to see the abattoir working more, because the private kill facility is a revenue for us. And it does help to keep the place going. But some people are so unreasonable in their demands because they see abattoir on the web and it's somewhere that's doing 30,000 sheep a week, and they think that we're the same. And some of the requests, well, they're absolutely bonkers, especially at this time of the year. You know, I had a lady last week phone me up and saying she'd got 3 cattle. She wanted them slaughtered for Christmas. She wanted them hung for 3 weeks. All the 4 quarters minced and made into burgers. And then I'll send you a list of how to do the rest, and I'll pick them up on the 23rd of December. Well, I'm just sitting here waiting for someone like her to call. I have a business, I have a staff, I have a duty of care to what I am doing. And, you know, it's lucky that I can take a step back and maybe take a blood pressure tablet. Because if my father was alive, he would fire on all cylinders. And that is one reason that people are saying, I've had enough, because demands are too much on a small premises. And of course, you then get, oh, well, we're only coming to you because we can't get into anywhere else. Well, you know, I mean, thank you very much. You know, this is why I spent 300,000 in keeping the abattoir going. waiting for you to call. But they've got to understand we're willing to help, but, you know, everybody, Christmas comes 25th of December every year. Every year. But people still want to kill pigs 3 days before.
Duncan, can I chip into this conversation?
Yes, do.
Just to say that it seems to me that because all the big meat companies and retailers have moved towards very highly industrial scale centralized slaughterhouses, that's one of the reasons why the demand, you know, with the exceptions of Christmas, etc., as you've just been saying, has shrunk. So really, if we could shame more food companies into slaughtering the animals that they sell within Wales, otherwise it's a welfare issue and a transport issue and just horrible, actually. I mean, if you look at the, you know, Dumbia abattoir, I think all Sainsbury's lambs go through that abattoir, but I think some of them come from as far away as Scotland, and no wonder people are going vegan when they know about these very long journeys. So in a way, we need to make sure, we need to put it out there that these very long journeys for animals to go to abattoirs are unacceptable. If you're farming in Wales, you're part of that, as we are, because even our barren cows have in the past gone very long distance to slaughter. So there's a big issue here about the policy of the big food companies who think that it's acceptable to send animals a long way to their single abattoir that they're using for all their animals.
That's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, we definitely agree with that. I think the problem is, though, the availability of abattoirs.
All of Sainsbury's meat for the whole UK.
Oh, we've got someone not on mute.
Okay. I thought there was maybe speaking, but so for example,
I think the host can mute them. I think the host can mute everybody if they need to.
Does anyone know who it is?
It's the person from Sainsbury's.
I think that if anyone knows a place in Wales that we can get chickens slaughtered organically, please tell us, because it is, the regulations make it really difficult for abattoirs, for small slaughterhouses to provide for that. So, for example, it is in our plan to have our own slaughterhouse on farm for the chickens, and that's what a lot of local poultry farms do, is they do it themselves. But you can only do it, as far as my understanding is, you get a certification to do your own poultry, but then you need a much more involved certification to do other people's poultry. So it ends up being that everyone does their own, and there's not really the availability to have that job done by someone else locally.
Which makes it difficult for small farmers to start, because they have to make that investment or have to travel really far to get their birds slaughtered.
So we're trying to start our market, and that might just be 20 chickens a week. But I can't invest £20,000, which I'd like to do to get it done properly, on 20 chickens a week. So I have to develop my market slowly by getting someone else to do it for me. And I've asked all the large that I know of chicken producers locally that are organic, and either they just don't want to do it. And part of that is the requirements, the regulations, if you start doing other people's poultry. And in fact, actually, we've been asked before we have our own slaughterhouse to do other people's poultry, because they're wanting to start their own poultry businesses, and they hear that we're going to start selling chicken, for example, and they're saying, great, I'd like to sell, I'd like you to slaughter our chickens for us. And it just can't, I'm not even sure we will, once we have our own slaughterhouse on farm, do other people's, even though that we know it was a problem for us, because one, the regulations, and two, the numbers sound crazy, but if you do less than 10,000 chickens a year, you're classed as a small farmer. And you, and to me, 10,000 chickens is quite a lot, but to any proper poultry farmer, it's not. So if you do less than 10,000 a year per holding, you are, the regulations are easier. So we will do those 10,000, and then it makes it difficult for us to do other people's, because that eats into our 10,000 number. So maybe if I'm charging someone £2.50, £3 to kill their chicken, that's a £15 chicken that I can't sell. So yeah, it's very,
yeah, but we need to change both the regulation, as was said earlier. If you're slaughtering on a small scale, your customer is the inspector, and therefore it's okay, and actually the risk of something going wrong is much reduced. Plus, I hate to say this, but I think that the organic regulations which require certification of abattoirs put abattoirs off getting registered, because there's so much bureaucracy involved. And frankly, you know, I was involved in the development of the organic livestock standards, and I think we've gone wrong. And I think it's more important to have a local abattoir where the people concerned care, as they do, for instance, in Tregaron, where we send our animals, than it is to have whether it's organically certified or not. It doesn't matter. You can get round the labelling. You can simply say reared on our organic farm, but not slaughtered. And you know, that's English, and you can get round the regulation and still sell your organic birds. That would be my advice to you. I'm waiting for the Soil Association to come and knock on my door now, but that's what I think.
William.
Yeah. Can I just come in now? I mean, Patrick's got a massive point there, because, you know, one of the things that I've done is, after investing 300,000 in the place, you go out to find as many people as you can to help you service the abattoir and service the debt that you've got. But the Soil Association weren't even interested. All they were interested in was me paying £600 to be a member. I didn't want to be a member. I wanted to help their members in my locality to come. And to get over the organic bit, I said, well, look, if we've got 4 lambs or a beast, we'll do them first. There's not a problem. But they were more interested in me spending the £600 to join. Now, going back quickly to the chicken farm, I've not got a lot of experience in it, because most of the meetings that I have with FSA and Welsh Assembly Government, it's red meat that we discuss. But 2 years ago, I was at a meeting in Cardiff, and I was horrified, glad to see a young chicken poultry farmer there, and had an abattoir. And he was reduced to tears when he explained how badly he was being treated by poultry meat inspectors stroke vets. Now, I have a degree in confrontation. I have a degree. I don't like it since I'm 55. I try to err against and away from it, because I have to take blood pressure tablets. But I was absolutely humming that day that a craftsman who was establishing a family business with his 2 daughters and his wife was reduced to tears because people were being vindictive. Now, this is the problem that we've got. You know, it is not fair that someone can put a family business plan together, and because someone in big boots from a centralised governmental department doesn't like it, that's it. It's not fair. And I will never, ever forget that lad. I will never. And Patrick, you ask Hugh Tregaron, he was with me. We both had to take a big gulp of air.
Tell you another thing that's happening. We're talking to Tregaron about whether they could compost their slaughterhouse waste, because one of their biggest costs, as you will know, is the disposal of the waste. And it looks as though it's possible that that could happen. And obviously it's a good fertilizer, and there's some abattoirs in America that are already doing that. So that's another way in which we could make things work better, and also recycle everything that is coming out of the abattoir.
Yeah.
Or most of it anyway.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, everyone. I think we're at the end of the time, yeah?